McKay, and welcome to Master Your Life with Kate McKay. I am so glad you've joined me on this day. We are very excited here to introduce Matthew Emmorey. Welcome, Matthew.
Thank you. So good to be here, Kate. Always great to be with you.
So excited. So Matthew, I usually would read a bio, but I'm much preferring to let people introduce themselves. Just first want to say that I met Matthew as they were interviewing me, as he works as a part of an incredible organization called Self-Publishing School. So Matthew is, a fellow journeying person that's traveled and experienced some amazing things. And I'm just thrilled that we're able to journey together in this next hour. So Matthew, if you could just give a little rundown on who you are and what you do and what inspires you today.
Yeah. So I think I'm coming off 10 great but very challenging years. And this last year has been just like, I think every year I say, this is the best year of my life. That's really been true. But I think in this last year, I'm finally like cracking the code, figuring out how to live life. I've been pretty much in the last 3 years on this continuous voyage of like not staying in the same place for more than maybe a month. And when I'm doing this, I feel like every time I plant my feet in somewhere new, they say like, wherever you go, there you are. I'm getting to bring this person with me that is looking around and constantly getting a chance to start fresh. It's like, I don't have any patterns here. I don't have any conditioning here. I'm in a new place. Like who am I right now in this moment, in this place, with these surroundings? Been fun. I mean, from living in a van, even though, as I said, it's been a challenging 10 years figuring this out. I think that I'm coming to this point where I am seeing so much beauty around me. And the more I see this beauty, the more I feel like I am becoming a part of this beauty and just immersed into it. I mean, that's me. I'm on the road. I'm on the go, constantly looking, for beauty.
So good. I love that. So when you think about, we just talked briefly because we could obviously talk for hours, but when we're talking about like the Buddha, right? It's that whole experience. And I know that you have a deep faith, and I definitely want to talk about that, particularly as it relates to your journey as being the bridge for yourself and others to this awakened state of consciousness and God. But when we look at like Buddha's journey, and, like just for background, I mean, many of you may know this, but he was very privileged, right? He was very wealthy. And a waysayer said, hey, he's going to be like an incredible spiritual leader. And parents were like, oh no, lock him in the castle, right? Because they were from a family of a lot of means. And then somehow, some way he got out age 19. I think that's what is it. And all of a sudden he sees people dying in the streets. He sees great suffering and he's like, oh my gosh. And he couldn't believe it, right? So that started his journey, his vagabonding, his warrior road tripping, as you have also done, into the wilderness. And then, under the Bodhi tree, obviously, he's like, man, I get it. I get what it means that suffering is a pathway to greater understanding, to be awakened to that. So could you just describe what are your feelings about that story and how it relates to your own journey?
Yeah. Suffering is a word I've thought about a lot in the last couple of years, because you do have, on one hand, you have Buddha saying like, life is suffering. And then here I'm going through my life and quite a bit of it is spent just like having fun and being joyful and playing and feeling childlike. And then there's this other line about suffering. It's like, not all attachment leads to suffering, but not all suffering is from attachment. And so what I've been thinking about in reconciling those two quotes is suffering is something that we're going to experience as humankind. And you can't get through life without suffering. The idea that you could possibly get through life without suffering is an attachment to this idea that somehow like you're going to do life in such a way that's going to just make it easy and nice for you. And you're not going to get to this point of ease if your life is easy. So just accept the fact that part of being a human is going to be suffering in different ways. Forget the attachment to this idea that you could ever avoid it and just be like, all right, I'm in it. This is part of being human. This is going to teach me something somehow. And if you are suffering and knowing that's inevitable, then maybe some of your suffering is because you've opened your heart and you've loved so big and so great. And then unfortunately, sometimes things happen and you lose people, and suffering can come from that. But suffering does not need to come from you trying to go through life attached to this idea that it's going to be easy.
Or that it's noble, right? Like the self-flagellation. I think that's an interesting piece, right, of suffering, is people think, I've got to beat myself up, because if I don't beat myself up, that something's wrong. Like I need to cause my own suffering. And again, I think that that's a form of attachment. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would. And I relate too. I mean, I've definitely had trouble, in things that have happened in my life, and feeling the resulting guilt and shame about those things. And then feeling like being a follower of Christ and having one of our biggest precepts be forgiveness, and yet seemingly forgetting that forgiveness can be applied to myself too, and I just have to receive it. So it's just like, I'm going to keep beating myself up for just a little bit longer, and maybe someday I'll earn it.
Yeah,
Forgetting
wow.
about.
It's powerful, isn't it? Well, I love this. One of my spiritual teachers said that, ultimately it's a path back to love. And even that expression namaste means the light in you sees the light in me, but together we walk each other home, right? People miss this piece that we are all walking each other home. We're on the journey together. How sacred is that, right? And the only way to come back to love is through taking responsibility for our experience, in hoping perhaps that someone would love us in the way we wanted to be loved, but they weren't able, and taking responsibility for our own experience. But then the other piece of it is understanding that it's forgiving other people, but most importantly, ourselves as a pathway home.
Yeah. Something beautiful that I just learned is, so our hearts are like, this is going to be a series of points to make a grand point that I find beautiful. But so our hearts are like more than 50 times more powerful electromagnetically than our minds. And so one thing, just keep that in mind for a second. So one thing I learned when I was in middle school and high school is we always talked about atoms, and we said, okay, we got proton, neutron forms the nucleus. And then there's this electron that's constantly orbiting, and it's also this particle. As we've gained knowledge in the quantum field, it's appearing that the electron isn't so much this constant particle. It's more of this negative energy. It's not a particle, it's more of a wave. But they discovered that there's these scientists that sort of accidentally discovered that anytime they looked for the electron in a particular place, they would find it. Almost as if their intention of finding the electron in a certain place was enough to collapse it out of the quantum energetic background, where it's just potential energy, into a particle. So human intention has the ability to take energy that is just latent in the universe and make it into matter. So it's enough to say that our intentions, as soon as you intend, something begins to become real. And so on an electromagnetic level, people have these divining rods in their chest that if you just go through your life with your heart open, meaning like trusting and loving and just knowing, and not like so keen on having your preferences be done and feeling like it's my way, it has to be my way, like I have to be in control. Instead, you can just keep your heart open and know that you've got this divining in your rod in your chest that's changing the world around you and bringing about the things that you most long for into existence. And so I hear that and I think we don't have to be so mind identified. We don't have to judge reality against our preference and say this is right or wrong. Albert Einstein had this quote. He says, nothing is either good or bad, but thinking makes it so.
Yes.
So we get so mind identified with our ideas, and then we close our hearts and we feel like, oh, this is not the way that I wanted it to happen. But I think it's like our hearts are 60 times more powerful electromagnetically. So just keep them open and let your heart do its work on the universe, because it will lead you, if you're paying attention, to exactly what you most long for.
Oh, so good. Thank you so much, man. That's so beautiful. I love that. A divining rod, our heart as the divining rod. Oh, so powerful. I love that. Really beautiful. So when you were growing up, I'm just curious about this because oftentimes what happens, and this actually references your second book that we'll be talking about, but oftentimes what happens, particularly with young men, because I'm writing a book right now, I've done a ton of research, particularly on men, because obviously you and I have talked about this, that I lost a brother and a son at the same age of 22. Interestingly enough, 11 times 2 is 22. So it's interesting that the studies have shown that what happens with young men, boys, is when they get to middle school, they start getting shamed into, like around sex, around their own expression, around expressing need, and in regards to play. That you're too old to play with Transformers. You're too old to use your imagination. That's not cool, right? But your book, you've labeled it as play. And I'm just so curious, how were you able to hold on to that essence of you as you work through this culture that is so anti-play as a man?
It's a slow shift. So the book that you're referencing, actually, so it's sort of a workbook, as you mentioned. It's sort of a challenge, but those weren't words that really resonated with me at all. So I decided to call it a game for this specific purpose. So it's called the kaleidoscope, spelled like collide-o-scope. Because as we go through life, we're constantly having these collisions. And so how you meet these collisions has everything to do with your internal disposition, as opposed to, like what the event actually is. So if I wake up in the morning and I drink my water and then I read my scripture or my devotional, or I do some quiet time, I do a little exercise, then I tend to collide with my day, even if it's stressful, more open and more playfully. So the idea of calling this a game was to cultivate this internal disposition of, this is going to be fun. Alan Watts has this quote. He says, "The secret to life is being in the here and now and realizing this is not work. This is play." But I have, like, through college and in the years after college, I got really, really, really serious about life. And I felt like if it is to be, it's up to me, and it's me against the world. I'm the only one. I'm separate from everybody else. And it's a zero-sum game. And I'm constantly having to fight people for every inch that I can get. And I think slowly but surely, I've started to be more intentional about infusing play into my life. Like just getting out into nature. And when you do that, everything else in life tends to show up a little bit more like a game, a little bit more fun. And then you start to see that, like you and I are very different, Kate, and you can get everything that you want in life, and I can get everything that I want in life. There's so much abundance. I don't have to compete with you. I don't have to be serious. I can just show up as myself. And we're created in such a way that we're, as children, when you're really childlike, you have all this energy and you're expressing yourself so much. And then you mentioned some conditioning that starts happening when you're in middle school, and probably even before that, but then like high school and beyond. And suddenly there's these layers that get like caked onto us that prevent us from being able to exhibit our childlike playfulness. But it's under there. And so I think that it's been a process of remembering myself. And also just the more you do that, even though it can feel like vulnerable to maybe go against what people are trying to condition you into, the more you'll see that, me just being me and you just being you and everybody else just being themselves. And it's really amazing when you have people in your life that are that way and giving you permission to be that way. Like surround yourself with playful people, because you'll pick up some of that vibe.
How would you tap into that though? Because I mean, the thing is that you have your process and your path, right? But what would you say if someone was like a dude or just anyone, like they don't experience that joy? And so one of your words is maximize. And so what is a way that you maximize fun and
Yeah.
maximize play. Because if you was someone that came to you and Matt and they were like, I don't have a clue what you're talking about. I don't even remember who I was. My fun went out with the Transformers.
Yeah. So there's this guy named Hans von Balthasar. He's an amazing name, really interesting guy. And he said the best way to evangelize is to go from the beautiful to the good and then eventually to the true. So I think a lot of people that have truth may think they have a monopoly on it, and their desire is to share their truth, but they don't exactly know how to get somebody who is seeing a very different world from them, like a very serious, dark world, and bring them to a point where they're experiencing the world in this like nice, light, fun, warm way. So according to Hans, you got to go from the beautiful and then to the good and eventually to the true. So cultivating this, if I were going to do it for somebody else or try to bring somebody else into it, like how can I give that person the experience of fun, of playfulness, of beauty? And maybe that is at any moment, at any time, I can always come up with a game. Give me a ball and an empty field, or give me a patch of grass. Like I'll come up with a game. And so helping people experience that beauty. And then you sort of over time, you'll shift the colors in their kaleidoscope. And then they'll just be able to see more beauty everywhere they look, or more play or more fun. But it's not about preaching it. It's about bringing people along with you to experience it.
And that's much of the journey of the creative, right? I mean, for you, the book and being able to experience beauty and joy in so many things, but then how do you be the way seer? As I mentioned you already, there is a unique quality about you. I think that most people who live in the energy don't see it. Looking for a motivational and inspirational speaker to host your next event? Reach out to me at kate-mckay.com. And maybe you would see it in someone else, but I certainly see you and my son, Will, there is a definite connection, but you walk in a different energy that is very peaceful. So even though you're playful and you have all these qualities and you're very transparent that it hasn't been easy for you, that you went from the warrior, I got to do it alone, to this new place, right? What do you want from this place? You're just crossing the bridge, right? We're just walking each other home. What do you think people need to know or hear in a different way, that from your place of inner knowingness that God imprinted in you? What do people need to know or to hear?
Yeah. A couple things come to mind. Number one, God does not plant a desire in your heart that he does not intend to fulfill. So if you're wishing for something right now, you can be assured that it's on its way. Even if you don't see the evidence of it right now, it's coming because the desire's in your heart. So just keep the heart open. I learned this next one from my ex at a time where I was like, this is my person and I just need to cling so tightly to this relationship. She said, this is as we're in the process of breaking up.
Ugh.
And she said, nothing that's meant for you will ever pass you by. And I got to admit, in that moment when she said that, my like fearful brain heard, well, this is her way of saying, to try to like soften the blow of the fact that she's about to walk away. And I think in many ways she was trying to ask for like the space and the freedom to like figure a lot out. And she has figured a lot out, and we're still great friends. We're not dating any longer. But I think that's a big one, is nothing that's really meant for you will pass you by. Also, God has never removed anything from my life without replacing it with something better. That's why every year of my life seems to be the new best year of my life. Is if this is the path that he wanted me on, I did a lot of like forking off and trying to do my own thing and have my own ideas, but I've stayed coming closer and closer to what that ultimate alignment would be. And that's what my relationship with God is all about. It's like helping me find the alignment, that the path that makes the most sense for me. So yeah, there's no need to worry about things. I think even as we show up in the future, it might not be okay, but you will be. And I see the evidence of this And I've been watching for the evidence of this for a while, that nothing has been taken away, even though it hurts to see things go and there's suffering involved in that, that isn't replaced by some lesson or something better.
Mm. So could you describe, I sort of want to go to the word success from the back door a little bit, and having you describe, if you don't mind, one of your favorite failures.
One of my favorite failures. So yeah, all right. So I moved into a van 4 years ago. The question soon after living and building the van or getting the van ready to be lived in was, how, while I'm in this van, am I going to make ends meet? You know, for a while it was like, well, I'll just save a bunch of money and then I'll get off the grid and I just will get out of society. But that wasn't going to allow me to be in the van for very long. And so I had this idea with a buddy of mine to come up with this company called Risk It Tickets. The idea was, not everybody can afford a championship ticket to like the football championship or the Final Four that just happened a little bit ago. But maybe what they could do is, throughout the season, you could buy a chance to go to the championship if your team went to the championship. If not, it was a wager. You wouldn't get a ticket, but you know, it's only like $20. So you can get a $400 or $500 ticket. You just have to risk it. And I ran it for college football the year I was in the van, and then college basketball the year I was in the van. And I tried to model it so that I was like hedging my bets and not putting myself in a position where I was like, I could lose too bad, but also that I couldn't really win too big either. And the way that the Final Four all came together, I won't go into the specific details, but it broke my models and it crushed me financially. And then we found ourselves like, well, I guess that money that we were going to spend on the big road trip is now going to fulfill these things for these people, these winners. And so Risk It Tickets at that point, sort of like the wind was taken out of my sails. And I kind of realized in that moment that I have a lot of ideas on this is what I learned. I know what I want to build in my life, and I know what I want my lifestyle to look like. And there's dozens of different paths to get there. And some of them, I'm going to love every second of it. Like I do writing books and doing stuff like this. Being an entrepreneur where I'm starting my own business and I'm handling everything is one path to get there, but it's not the path that's meant for me. Like only running my own business, even though I thought that's how I'm going to get to this other place, it's not for me. I learned that.
That's awesome.
And so I guess just to summarize, we can all get where we want to go, but you got to pay attention to the fact that the journey happens before the destination, and you got to pick a journey that you're going to be psyched about.
And then learning the lessons, right? It's like the rewind and repeat, right? I mean, people get stuck in that because it's familiar, right? So it seems like you have reached this, I know I'm going to use that word mastery, right? But there has been a place in you that you've maximized the experience of being uncomfortable, right? I mean, can you embrace that as a place where, yeah, I know what it's like to be uncomfortable?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so why do you think that that's important in our journey?
Yeah. Well, okay. So much of the best things in life are like right on the other side of this discomfort. I used to think that if I felt a negative emotion, it would be a domino effect. And eventually I would just be overcome with sadness. If I admit to myself something that's hard to admit, that's a slippery slope. And now I'm depressed. I think only by wading into some of these emotions and letting myself feel these things, do I realize the sequence is different than I thought it was. Sadness actually seems to lead to joy quite often. And that was very unexpected. I think you have to experience that where you're like, I'm willing to go and feel this thing, and it's cathartic. And then on the other side of my joy or the other side of my sadness is joy. Like, wow. Or on the other side of my fear is freedom, and not like you experience those things and you learn, you notice, and then eventually it's just, I know what's going to happen if I embrace this.
And then being okay to know that it's to experience, because I think that's a lot of the work, certainly that I'm learning in the journey of writing Claim Your Inner Warrior, is that I think that's true for a lot of men, that they feel that number one, it's like speaking their need is putting yourself in a place of vulnerability and open up that heart, and not realizing that the other piece of vulnerability is being able to say yes, no, or maybe. That it doesn't have to be, it doesn't mean that you're just going to be slammed and give and yield to all things. It's about, man, I can stand into what I need and what my truth is. That's really a definition, right? Of being courageous. But the other piece of that is just knowing that it's not the domino effect. And I think that that's what a lot of people, men and women, believe. And that goes whether it's your own personal growth and understanding or your relationship to God, you know, and wherever people are in that journey, and in intimate relationships. Sometimes, like, man, if I speak my need that I'm like feeling alone or I'm feeling sad, that's someone's going to just slam all over you. Right. And I think in general, the latest studies have shown that people want to be in deep conversation. You know, I mean, for me, my motto is go deep and bring the joy. Like, I want to go deep in conversation and then use the joy and the light of God. For me, it's what it is. And so I'm not afraid to go to the deep places and bring the light there, because that's why I'm here, right? Because I've gone through great suffering. And on, just like you said, in losing my child came the greatest awakening of my life and the biggest place of bliss and joy. And I just want to actually show you something. I want to read a quote that I think, this is my picture of my boy. For viewers, you can see it, but this is his prayer card, right? Yeah. But on the back of it, it says, all things are impermanent. They arise and pass away. Having arisen, they come to an end. Their coming to peace is bliss. Right. So it's like, oh, you know, that's by a Thai forest. That's a Thai forest Buddhist prayer. Right. So isn't that the truth? Right.
Yeah, it is.
So a couple other questions I want you to talk about the book, but how do you define a warrior?
Yeah. How do I define a warrior?
What does that mean to you in this moment now where you are in your journey?
You know, interestingly enough, the first word that came to mind as I thought of warrior is peace. Maybe ironically, I think of a warrior as someone who knows no matter what happens, no matter where they go, that they're going to be okay, and is just able to meet life and accept life in its reality. And sometimes it's ugly and sometimes it's challenging, but a warrior knows that they're okay.
Woo! That's good. I got goosebumps. So Matthew, tell us about your projects. I want to be able to, I'll be making sure to share your information in the show notes, but if you could just give us a little rundown on your two books, how they're actually companions, and where people can find them. Yeah.
So in order to talk about the Detourist, which is this book that's coming soon, I want to back up to the first one, which is kind of where it all began. That book's called Where the Rubber Meets the Road. And it was about my year that I lived in my van when I crashed headlong into Jesus. And, and so I wrote about that and a lot of the lessons that I learned. And so the Detourist is kind of an identity that I think is available to people, and maybe not an identity, but sort of a mindset that's available to people. So obviously we know what a tourist is, you know, someone that you'd usually associate them with being on vacation. And we know what a detour is. So the detourist is somebody who is taking a look around his or her life, and maybe it's not exactly where they wanted to be. If they had it according to their plan, they wouldn't have had it go this exact way, but they're still going through life with the immersive, loving presence that people would meet with vacation, and they're just playing their way through life. It's somebody that looks at life and they say, well, this is the reality. I accept it, and I'm not judging it. I'm not evaluating it. I'm living it. Eckhart Tolle said something to the effect of, how do we know that this moment is purposeful? Because you're experiencing this moment right now. And life is experienced through us. And so if we let it, every moment that we ever go through is purposeful and getting us where we want to go. And so that's the spirit of the Detourist is, okay, you know, I accept this moment too for what it is. It's here to teach me something. And on the other side, I'll be a little wiser, a little bit more peaceful, a little bit closer to where God wants me. And the spirit of the Detourist is very much like everybody that's here in this area with me is also traveling with me. And so you want to do life with these people. Every interaction is for something. So that's the Detourist, and it talks about the law of attraction. It talks about quantum physics. It talks about scripture. Talks about some of the teachings of Christ and of the Buddha and all kinds of things. And then a big theme in that book is surrender. I mean, play is a big theme. Awareness is a big theme. Will and willpower is a big theme. And so the companion is called the kaleidoscope, spelled like kaleidoscope. It's just a 14-day game where each day you have something small that you do, maybe something that you contemplate. And by the end of it, you'll have like a little bit more of an expansive ability to look at the world and say, okay, since my perception makes reality, how can I judge things a little bit less and trust a little bit more so that I can see maybe what this moment has to offer me?
That's awesome. And that will be available soon. And again, by the time this releases, it'll probably be pretty close. So I'll make sure to add that to our show note. Beautiful. So cool. I love the way you talk thematically. What I love about it the most too, is that like we're from different generations, but you so speak to my heart. And one of the things that I know for sure is that the younger generation just has a deeper level of conscious awareness and understanding of higher mind or God or whatever we want to call it. And I just want to say I completely honor you, your courage and your transparency and your willingness to surrender to the lesson and be the teacher in the unknowingness. And I think that it takes great courage to do what you do and speak from the heart as you do. So I appreciate your 60% energy source of that heart and how you lead through the world. I'm deeply grateful for you. Thank you.
Thank you for saying that. I delight in that assessment. That's beautiful.
And I have one final question. And this final question is this. So if you had a billboard, it could be anywhere you want, along, Highway 66 or, Times Square, what would you want that billboard to say? And more like, what do you want people to know in their hearts from your place of deep knowingness?
Wow. That is a great question. It's a big question. I'll probably continue to think about this. And then later on today, I'll think, ooh, that would also be good. And I'll come up with 10 more ideas. But I think I'd want it to have a big, cheery smile on it, because those are infectious. And I'd want it to say trust. I think we all can reward ourselves with a little bit of grace and a little bit of forgiveness. And one of the biggest, the things that I feel like fills me the most these days is trust. I got so many quotes in my head from different people, but I think it was another Eckhart Tolle quote. He says, the greatest obstacle to God is the past and the future. And if you're not in the present, then it's probably because there's something that you're dwelling on from the past. And you're thinking, that's not how I wanted it to be. But or you're thinking about something in the future and you're worrying about that, and we tend to do this dance where it's like, I want to predict the future because I want to be ready for it. And so I go through my present and I'm kind of half living in the future, anticipating the future. But when you're doing that, you're not really even present. So you're trying to predict the future that you're not even present in. And so you're like already living in an illusion, trying to guess at what the future illusion will be. But if you just trust, and you're just here and you're just noticing things and your heart is open, remember, because that's the part to get the world to be transformed by your electromagnetism, then number one, you're going to have a better shot of predicting what's coming. And number two, you're going to be actively making it.
Right. So true.
Smile.
Yeah.
Trust.
I love it. Right on. And we can do a whole series for you, Matt. We're going to do a series of billboards across, maybe they should go across Route 66 or something fun like that.
Yes.
I love
Sounds
that.
Good.
Well,
Let's
thank
go.
you so much for your time. I totally appreciate it. And again, in the show notes, I will be sharing your contact information where people can follow you and play with you through this bridge we call life. And thank you again, Matthew. I really appreciate you.
Thank you, Kate. Always a pleasure. So fun. It'll be your smile on the billboard.
No, yours. So thank you to the viewers and listeners. I'm Kate McKay, and this is Living a Life of Mastery. Go claim this day and trust that you're going to be okay. Trust that love is the centering force of all things, and trust that you know in your heart, you know. Take good care and have an incredible day. Hi, this is Kate McKay. If you're interested in booking a strategy call with Kate McKay, please reach out to us at kate@kate-mckay.com. I look forward to speaking to you soon.